What are your views on this, just the latest escalation of tensions between Beijing and Canberra? Is there a sense that Australia is pushing its diplomatic relationship too far, calling for this investigation at this sensitive time?
Look, I'm of the view that there will be a global inquiry into the pandemic, and I don't think that's a bad thing at all. But what I am saying is let's make sure it's not politically orientated in any way, shape or form, and let's ensure that that it comes after the US election. My preference for after the US election is that that'll stop it being used as a political football by any country, and certainly it will not distract from the immense work which must be done by every country working together. If we don't all work together in what is the biggest crisis probably since World War II, then we're going to set the whole world back. And let's just get this virus behind us first, get the US election out of the way, where I'm sure China would be a great political football, and then do an inquiry by all means. And it would be a COVID inquiry. It wouldn't be a China inquiry. The world wants to know what actually happened.
You've now faced criticism this morning from media saying that, what you did, this surprise or, what's been called an ambush by calling the Chinese Consul General in Victoria to come on stage with the Health Minister, Greg Hunt, that was seen as a political move.
Yeah, no, thank you. When we helped break the back of the personal protective equipment crisis in Australia, unsurprisingly, I brought in the Consul General of China from Western Australia in there as well. There was no surprises whatsoever that I should also invite the Consul General of Victoria in for what we were doing in Victoria only 3 or 4 weeks later. I would have invited in the Consul General of Holland or Japan or America if they'd really helped Australia get through this COVID-19 crisis. It was China who is really helping us, and I certainly invited him, and he was welcomed by the minister, and he spoke incredibly well. And where this comes from is that the minister got very rudely interrupted, disrespectfully by a journalist as he was leaving, and the cameras panned onto the minister quite correctly, abruptly saying no and walking out. The whole of that announcement was a day of celebration. It was a great relationship which was being celebrated by two fabulous businesses, Minderoo and Fortescue, and Genomics Beijing Institute, BGI. So, there was no surprise. There was nothing like that. This is the biggest non-story I've ever heard of.
So where do you stand on Australia pushing for this independent probe on the origins of the virus? Should this be done if, at the end of the day, it will cost Australia's business and relationship with China?
Yeah, I think that we need to be really sensible. We have a fabulous trading relationship with China, with Japan, with North America. We should not be choosing a best friend. Australia is a small country which is deeply reliant on trade. We put food on our tables around the country every night because of our reliance on trade. And jumping up and down on our partners' toes, I wouldn't have thought is the wisest thing. But I would also say this. There will always be an inquiry with something this big. If North America really wants it straight away for political purposes, why don't they just call for it? I think Australia has got itself into a fabulous COVID-19 position. There's only one way out of this if you don't have a vaccine, and that's with testing. Every scientist knows that. And we now are in an enviable position globally to be able to test our way out of this COVID-19 jail. I want to thank China for that. I want to thank North America for everything they've done. I want to thank every country. But I say this, Australia should have best friends around the world, shouldn't choose our best friend.
So you have, in a way, acted as a procurement agent for Australia when it comes to protective equipment coming from China. How cooperative have the Chinese been in trying to help Australia out, especially when it comes to securing quality goods? Yeah,
look, I used to believe in fairies at the bottom of the garden, and I don't any longer believe that. I don't believe that you can do things in China of really great scale unless Chinese government supports it. What we've done is of really great scale, both the tens of millions of dollars of personal protective equipment procurement when it was absolutely rarer than diamonds. And then, of course, to stepping up and providing these fully approved by all governments, particularly Australia, PCR RNA testing equipment, which tells you the absolute truth about whether or not a person has COVID-19 or flu or any other SARS or virus pandemic. It tests for everything. And I think we're so fortunate that we've had really strong Chinese government support. I'm of the view that we look after our trading partners and we certainly care for our country. As I like to joke, I carry the oranges out to the football field for Australia. I want to do whatever's best for Australia, and that means having a great friend in China, a great friend in America, and great friends around the world, not picking and choosing.
Andrew, is that friendship with China strange when the Chinese ambassador makes, allusions to potential boycotting of Chinese goods, saying that, Chinese people may not want Australian beef or Australian wine? Are you concerned that if tensions worsen, that Chinese steelmakers might boycott Australian iron ore?
No, look, I'm really not. We're all adults. We're all over 21 in the business sector. We're getting on with the job of building our country. Politicians can get on with the job of being politicians, but as business people, we're just cracking on. I believe strongly that Chinese consumers, like Australian consumers or Japanese consumers, they all have free choice. I think the ambassador might have been warning that, Chinese people have free choices too. That doesn't concern me. What I believe is that everyone acting in their own best interest will send their kids to our great universities in Australia. They will participate in our wonderful agricultural and energy and mining sectors because trade between countries is the right thing to do and being hostile is the wrong thing to do.
Andrew, I want to throw up a terminal that shows our viewers the situation when it comes to China stockpiling iron ore. I'm wondering what your gauge in conversations that you've had with counterparts and with trading partners over there, how the economic recovery is going. What sort of a shape do you see it taking place as, and how do you see that impacting levels of demand and the forecast for iron ore?
I think it's a really good question with a very big lesson in it. China got through its malaise, its terrible tragedy of COVID-19 through PCR RNA testing. The world doesn't have a vaccine yet. It's probably 18 months away to get a safe to humans, mass-produced for the world vaccine. So we have to handle this virus and get it out of our countries and get our economies back to work through testing. Now, China went really hard on testing, scientific testing. China's now allowed Australia to go just as hard itself. And you can tell that China both has recovered and will further grow because their order books, particularly for Australian iron ore, are very strong. We are selling everything we can possibly produce. The order books are full, and the relationships with steel mills all over the world, and particularly in China, are really good.
And Andrew, before we let you go, what do you think of the reopening happening in Australia? Because we know that the infection rate has now dropped below 1%. Already here in the United States, we're seeing states starting to reopen, but Australia's government has pushed that to later in the month of May. How demand destructive will that be for businesses there?
I think that this now comes up to the premiers of each state in Australia. We are a federated system of government, so the premiers of each state has a big say in how quickly they open up their states. I know in Western Australia, Victoria, New South Wales, South Australia, Queensland, every premier wants to open up their states as quickly as possible. What has happened yesterday, and which got brought in just lightning fast time, we set our suppliers the most unreasonable schedules. 3 weeks to build something which might have taken 2 years. It all got done. We've got 11 huge laboratories now operating across Australia, 10 million COVID-19 reagent tests, and this country is, and I'm really encouraging our premiers can test its way out of COVID-19 jail, get its kids back to school, its uni students back in lecture halls, and most importantly, our companies and workers back to work.